Hello. Hi. This is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. I decided I should do a quick Friday reads for you to talk about a few of the books that I have finished in the last 2 weeks. So I hope you're all doing well. Thank you to all the new subscribers. I'm happy to see you here. Thank you so much. Okay. I have 3 books to tell you about this week. I am in the middle of reading several other books, so I will have more later on in February to talk about. But the books I wanted to talk about this week start with a reread of Emily St. John Mandel's very first novel called Last Night in Montreal. I read this book when it came out, and it was a 5-star read for me back in 2009. Her first publisher was a small press called Unbridled Books, and it was owned by people who lived in my same city in Denver, Colorado. So I remember I had just left my little publishing venture that I was in, and I had followed Unbridled Books. They were, somebody I really admired and looked up to, and they were very excited about this new young Canadian writer. And I was excited and had seen her a little bit online, so decided to read it, and I loved the book. It is kind of a mystery. I wouldn't call it noir, but it is very disconnected in a sense. It's full of characters who are either running away or they're looking for something that they don't have in their own lives. Essentially, a father comes and takes his daughter away from his ex-wife. And it happens in the middle of the night, and he beckons her down from her second-story room, and she sees him, and she sneaks down the stairs. She has a half-brother who sees the whole thing happen, and the father takes her away. And so the story is set in 2 time periods. It's set in the present, which is several years after the fact of the kidnapping. But for most of her childhood, she and her father are running away. The kidnapping takes place in Canada, and they go to the United States because he is American. And essentially, they drive across country trying not to be caught because he has taken his daughter. So there's lots of mysteries about why he did that, why she stayed with him, why she wanted to stay with him. And then we have the present day story where she is grown and she doesn't live with her father anymore, but she can't stay in any one place for a long period of time. And she does not know how to connect or set down roots. And so she has a lover, and he is very upset when she leaves. And so that part of the story is told mostly from his perspective and his search for her. So she's got people looking for her entire life. And so that's what the book is about, essentially. And I have to say, the second time I read this, it did not ring as true for me as it did the first time. And I think part of that is because Emily St. John Mandel became such a better writer from that first novel. And then she wrote a couple other mysteries, kind of literary mysteries. And as each book was written, she got better and better. So I would say this is definitely a weak book compared to Station 11 or The Glass Hotel or Sea of Tranquility. Those 3 books really, really shine. This book didn't shine as well, and so I had to take stars off of my initial reading of it. I still have a warmth for reading it because I loved it so much when I read it the first time. So that just goes to show that sometimes when you reread a book that you really loved, it might be diminished in some way from your account of that, but it doesn't matter because I had that experience in 2009 and it meant a lot to me. And I enjoyed the reread, and I enjoyed seeing that I was older and that Emily St. John Mandel is older, and we are both older, and we both have different reading perspectives, and we live in a changed world. And so that was a very valuable experience for me. The second book I'd like to talk about is an audiobook. It was audio only by Erik Larson. It's his only fiction, I believe, and it's called No One Goes Alone. He took a lot of his research from Marconi, from the development of the radio and being able to signal and transmitters. And he wrote a whole book called Thunderstruck about all of these phenomena and the development of a technology. And so some of that research he used in this ghost story. He takes a bunch of people who existed in real life, like William James and other people, and essentially brought them to this deserted island, British island called Dorne, which is not a real island, but a family had completely disappeared from the house that was on the island. And so William James was historically very interested in spiritualism and religious experience and the phenomena that humans experience from otherworldly stimuli, or he's at least curious to know if it's just something that's manufactured in the brain as part of our experience on Earth, that we are our psychology, or if there really are outside forces kind of imposing themselves into our lives. And so he takes that curiosity, and they essentially have a ghost story because the family disappeared, and there are a couple of women characters who I have to say are portrayed pretty flatly, and the dialogue is not particularly good in this. So I'd say Erik Larson is a much better nonfiction writer than a fiction writer. Things start happening to them on the island, like the fire completely goes out, and then the fire happens again. And there is one character in the book who is a skeptic, and so he's there to kind of give his perspective on how things could be faked. And so each person in the group is there to represent a particular viewpoint from the historical phenomenon that was going around in the early 1900s, where people were very interested in seances and connecting with the dead and all of those things. So it just doesn't really completely work for me. It's audio only, and so there's a lot of info dumping about different historical people and their philosophies on these phenomenon. And it's not something you can really go back to refresh yourself about those things as we're going very easily. And also, I just thought the characters were completely flat, and the ending absolutely did not work for me. It was such a pastiche of different novels that might have been set in that same time that were done so much better, that it just doesn't work on a level of fiction for me. The ending absolutely did not work for me, and I don't want to give away what it was, but I thought it was just a complete cop-out. So anyway, that book, that was by far the least good book I've read so far in 2024. And finally, I'd like to talk about another Irish novel that I read. It happened to be free, available from my library, so I just snagged it. And it's called The Wren by Enright. I just saw Bob, the booker, talking about this the other day, and I was reading it at the time. This is a novel about 3 generations of an Irish family. There is Nell, who is in her late 20s, I believe, and then her mother, Carmel, and then Carmel's father, Phil. Okay, his name is Philip. Philip is a famous Irish poet in this story, and he writes a lot of poetry about birds and then their relation to humans and metaphors for birds and so that is part nature and birds and wildlife, and the wildlife of Ireland are part of his poetry. So he's famous. He's been interviewed. He's not like at a James Joyce level, but he's at a kind of a mid-level of popularity and notoriety in Ireland. And the story starts out with Nell, who is the youngest, and she's a millennial, and she is talking about her life. Social media really plays deeply into this, the advent of Instagram and influencing and being able to write blogs that actually can make money for you. So she's a freelance writer. She writes for influencers, and she writes blog posts for them, and she also writes her own material. And so that's how she cobbles together a living. But she has a lot of problems, and she is very insecure and unhappy, and she gets involved in a very upsetting relationship with a man. And so a lot of the book is about that relationship and as it evolves. So I wanted to read you just a little bit of, this is from the very first chapter. The characters really drive this novel, and the way that their narratives unfold make us empathize and make us think about these characters and really grow close to them, even though we may not agree with all the things that they do and say. This is Nell talking. We don't walk down the same street as the person walking beside us. All we can do is tell the other person what we see. We can point at things and try to name them. If we do this well, our friend can look at the world in a new way. We can meet. When I began thinking about all this, I was interested in empathy, like it's the solution, and it is to pretty much everything. I thought about gender and empathy, religion and empathy, the evolutionary benefit of empathy. I had a big, beautiful cake in my head called Feeling the Pain of Others, and I sliced it this way and that because I thought that emotion is the bridge between people. Sentiment crosses space. Sympathy is a gas, exhaled by one, inhaled by another. Empathy, it's just like melting. We can merge, we can connect. We can cry at the same movie, you and I, but some people can't do this really quite complicated thing. There is a gap. These days, I think there is a real gap between me and the next person. There is a space between every human being, and it is not a frightening space. The empty air which exists between people might be crossed by emotion, but it might not. You need something else, or you need something first. People are different and they think differently. Now, I think the word we need is translation. And that is kind of a metaphor for all of the connections between the characters. They need to translate each other's words and thoughts and speech to be able to connect to each other. So Carmel is Nell's mother, and she is a single mother, and her whole backstory and about how she was raised and her relationship with her mother and her sister and her father, who abandons the family when her mother gets cancer and moves to America and marries someone else, is a big schism in the family. And it was a harm that was caused to these teenage girls as their mother was dying, and he just essentially left them. And so that's interesting, and then you hear Nell's point of view first, then Carmel tells a lot of the story, and finally later on in the book we get a narrative from Phil the poet, and it is about his upbringing and what it was like to live in kind of a almost feral, in a sense, family where there are a lot of children that are left. They're very poor and they're kind of left to their own devices, but he is able to go to school and get an education and become a man of words and a man who can translate what he sees in the world through nature and base instinct into this beautiful poetry, which is also included in the novel, throughout the novel, how his poems resonate with his daughter and his granddaughter and him. And so it's a pretty short novel, but it weaves together a very intricate tapestry of this family and how words insinuate themselves in memory and feeling and trying to find your own strength, and also trying to preserve a little core of yourself without giving it away because it could be betrayed, which is kind of a theme in a lot of things I'm reading lately, which is really interesting about preservation of ourselves and our core, and not putting it out there so that you can't get hurt if someone finds out your true essence. So I highly recommend this book. If you like Irish literature, it fits right in with all of the other books that are coming out now. And I don't know why I'm so drawn to Irish literature, but this book really resonated with me and I enjoyed it a lot. So that's what I've finished. The books that I'm currently reading are, let's cue it up here. All right, I am listening to the audiobook of The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. I'm enjoying that. I'm not very far in, so I don't have anything to say about it yet. I am still reading the Best American Short Stories of 2023, edited by Min Jin Lee, and the stories are getting better. we read a couple of really excellent stories this week that really actually fit very well together. They complemented each other. They were both about women and their mothers and daughters and all of their friendships and relationships. And that thing I was talking about preserving yourself and protecting it and hiding it, was in both of those stories. I'm reading a really straightforward and just engaging, fun novel called Friends and Strangers by Courtney Sullivan. And I'm enjoying that. I've never read any of her books before, but I'm enjoying the fiction. It's about a woman who hires a college student to babysit her baby, and the relationship and friendship and mentorship that kind of develops between the two women. They both have secrets. They both have things in their lives they can't share, but it's just kind of a commentary on what social media does in relationships and how it can connect and disconnect people. Book clubs, just conventional suburban life versus city life, and long distance relationships. And there's a lot of things going on here, and I'm really enjoying that book. And I just started Plainsong, which is a reread. I am reading that with evening reader Priscilla, and we are just getting into that, but we both really wanted to reread some Kent Haruf. So that's what we are doing, and that is fun. So please tell me in the comments if you have read any of these books, or you have anything to say, or just say hi. Or anyway, have a great weekend, and thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.